argue with sexy.
I'm so glad I managed that. I hope that started then. Because
come on.
that was
Leave
so
him alone.
nuts. No,
Oh,
I do hope
Leave
that
him alone. He can't turn it off. He
Yeah.
can't turn off the sexy.
It can't turn off the sexy. Yeah. Hello, dear viewer. If you're here, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be in the world. We were giving Bruce so much abuse when he arrived. I thought I better hit start broadcast just so hopefully you got some of that. Good day, gentlemen, one and all. Thanks for joining us. There's quite a few things to get through this evening, I suppose. Did anyone else see on the Book of the Face the chap moaning that he is under investigation from the FAA because he called a Mayday on his airband radio when his Phantom or whatever it was it fell out of the sky? Can you believe that? Mayday on an airband radio. I don't know. Anyone else see that?
Oh my God.
Nope.
No, I on the Book of Faces, I saw a more serious one. A guy announcing that he successfully tried his GPS 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz jamming device. Last time I checked, jamming GPS is pretty much illegal almost anywhere in the world. So let's see how that goes on the Book of Faces.
Well, I think what surprised me even more was people saying things like, well, is it really possible to jam stuff? That's what amazed me. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's unfortunately easier than people think. That's the problem. Just like the whole internet, so it's so fragile. You can break things so easily. People don't realize how fragile everything is.
It's like life, man. It's like life itself. Everything is so fragile. Yeah, no, you're right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. Yeah, I was very surprised, and as Louis alluded to, it's why just about. Well, no, I'm sure. I'm convinced everywhere in the world it's illegal to do that. And GPS jamming of that Schliebel camcopter in 2012, I think it was, that led to the aircraft flying through.
Hold on. Do you have proof it was a GPS jamming? We don't.
Yeah.
From that Schliebel, there were some questions about if it was North Korea interfering allegedly over that. But come on, you crash an aircraft for manipulating / jamming the GPS. That's some bad flight controller on that.
It was 2012. It was back, I mean, that's 1,000 years ago in drone years.
Yeah, and in 2012, how many flight controllers did rely exclusively on GPS to hold position and not being able to hold position without the GPS? So, yeah, it's a good Gatwick type story.
Oh, all right then. All right, we'll put it that. There's definitely spoofing, and they definitely spoof cash in transit vehicles here all the time because they're sending their position back to base, and that's what they do before they tip them over. And then it's like when you get a turtle or a tortoise or something, you tip it over and open it from the bottom, and that's what they do to cash in transit vehicles. Here's James. Good day, James. How you doing?
Evening, how are you?
Very good, thank you. We were just talking about a Mayday thing, and now I'm going to actually. You're not there today, Tom. I thought you might be at AUVSI, but it struck me that most of the big announcements were actually last week. The first one of which was AeroVironment and their HAPS and Loon mishmash up together. I thought that was a pretty big announce, especially as we were just talking about that last week about how good Loon was. So I don't know. Did anyone have any thoughts on that one? AeroVironment and Loon ganging up.
That was news to me. I didn't hear about that. This is the since Milestone.
Yeah. So it's a lot bigger than that, and they actually, it was a bit weird. I went to they sent me the link to the press conference, so I recorded it, and so I did my teaching in the morning, and then I was at a press conference in Japan as soon as I got home and had me lunch, which was amazing. But I've never had as many pages of information about anything before. So that, and the bank that's in with it is obviously thinking hard and joining the dots and not having a sort of a satellite-based system for sending cellular signals everywhere. So I thought that was a huge announcement, really.
Well, it makes so much sense to have something like low Earth orbit is actually still pretty far. You still actually bounce it over and go down, and the shorter you can do that, everyone was looking at the absolute shortest route. So it makes sense to do stuff like this. So much easier to service them and all that.
In that case, it's much relevant, the news that Mr. Musk / Iron Man has been granted permission to start a new network of low orbit satellites. That's the biggest news.
Well, but it's a bit of a race, isn't it? But at the end of the day, all the stuff that AeroVironment and Loon have works now, today, as we speak. None of the stuff that Mr. Musk has, ask whoever he is, Iron Man, is up there and working yet.
Well, to defend him a little bit, I think what he's actually doing is, sure, it works in the U.S. or in the world, in the Earth, I should say, and that's great and all. But no one really cares about that. It's all about doing the same thing on the Moon and Mars.
So yeah, he already sent the car there, so anything goes.
Because you just get once you get your communication network set up, you get like a global positioning system set up. You're set for your planet. If you own all that, then he's miles ahead, infrastructure wise, than anyone else. And if you get to own that, then you get to own the economy.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I hadn't considered that. I hadn't considered that at all. Yes, of course, the first to have internet on Mars, but of course. Wow.
Well, not just internet, but I mean, just network. I mean, in general, because you're gonna be there, and you got one Wi-Fi access point, and you're like, "Yay, perfect signal!" Like just you.
Yeah, that's so much bandwidth because there's no one else there. Fantastic,
right.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. All right, and then the next, so jumping on from that was then Wing, which we predicted as well a couple of weeks ago because we'd heard it was happening. Wing got certified to blah 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 delivery blah blah. So what, really, isn't it? Wasn't that one a bit so what?
Well, it's not so what. I mean, it's the first in the U.S. at least, which is a big deal because it's so hard to do anything here. But it's basically business as usual for them because they've been doing that for a while in Canberra, Australia.
Yeah, but not quite so much now because the residents are so unhappy about the noise that they're slowing that right up. So you guys are going to have that learning lesson over there. But the great delivery that was RG Pilot related that happened last week, I think it was, or this week, was the organ that was flown through the air via. Philip's not here. He's supposed to be here and taking the rod. It was a Wurlitzer. That's right. Yes, it was a Wurlitzer. It was one of the larger delivery drones. Yes, it was a Wurlitzer. Younger people won't know what you're talking about there, Bruce.
Nope.
But that was cool. That was RG Pilot and the Cubes. That was very cool. And then Zipline, they launched the largest. So they rather eclipsed. I thought it was very clever. And this was all last week. They sort of eclipsed the Wing announced by unveiling what's happening in Ghana, which is a huge delivery setup, and it instantly becomes the largest in the world. So they've had to go overseas, but they are banging away at it, and I'm pretty amazed with that.
Oh, yeah. They've actually been at that for several years. I would say they are probably the furthest. I don't know much about them. I haven't met them or anything, but I would say that since they've been doing it for so long, that they're probably the most experienced. The hard part's not really the autopilot these days. The hard part is purely all about the logistics, and that's what Wing was doing over in Canberra, was just figure out the logistics and all that.
No, for sure. No, and again, I mean, at the end of the day, Wing is still miles ahead of Amazon, who've just advertised for another pilot, whether that pilot is replacing whoever's been there or whatever, because they're not doing a lot of flying. I don't know.
We don't know. These big companies usually don't go out throwing out press releases for every single flight they do. They're in for a bigger game that we might be expecting. So, and looking at the pattern that, for instance, Amazon does their announcements, I believe if they go ahead with that, with their plans or what they announced they wanted to do, you'll see a very complete off-the-shelf product being made. Look at what they did with the e-readers, their tablets, and all that. Granted, they had some misfortune with their phone, their mobile phone, because they were competing against two big giants. But on this area, I believe they are perhaps the guys that are more qualified to get something on that specific domain, the delivery stuff. And if you tie that with their plans of ensuring one-day delivery for the Prime members in US, that's not an easy task to do. So they must have something very near completion to get this, because they work as a puzzle, so they have a lot of pieces to put together, and the delivery drone might be one of those pieces.
Do you really think
for Amazon? It has to be. They've been advertising for it. They're committed now.
Don't you think they're just scooping up as many patterns as they can in order to annoy people along the way and not really doing anything, protecting their market?
Oh, come on. If you go to patent orders, there are some guys that are excelling on that. They go patenting or buying patents for the most ridiculous stuff, as long as it says blockchain, AI, RPAS, UAV, drone. If your patent has these words, I'm sure it will last 5 minutes before being bought by someone. Yeah, they are buying a lot of stuff. They are not buying stuff, patents and other technology blindly. They have a plan. You can see that from the outside. We cannot seem to be sure of what it is, but they do have it, because you can see a certain pattern on their behavior.
Okay, all right then. All right.
I'm not defending Amazon. Come on, they take a lot of money from me every month, so
they don't deliver here, so they don't from me. They won't do anything in country here. It's too much. It's thieved. But we'll see. James, you've been very quiet. Can't we tempt you in, James? Come on, let's see if we can hook you in.
I've been, I'm just recovering from the day, so give me like 5 minutes, but I've had my 5 minutes now. So yeah, the whole Zipline stuff is proper interesting, and it's quite good to see like some of the developing countries sort of getting their noses ahead in things like this. What I do think will be quite interesting is once they've got that experience will be sort of cross-compatible to places like the United States. So, will some of these countries who have, some of these entrepreneurs who've started up in places like South Africa actually become sort of dominant on a more global scale as things sort of pan out, I think. And it might, put the likes of Amazon and Google sort of behind the curve, so to speak. So, yeah, I think Zipline are doing some absolutely fantastic stuff. Like, they've clearly got a system which is reliable. They're getting the experience. And as we've seen through sort of the permissions process, a lot of sort of operational safety cases, what they're called in the UK, but essentially exemptions. They're based on experience. You obviously need some as you up the complexity of these kinds of missions, you start having to introduce more proof and certification into the process. But certainly the experience is going to go in their favor, and they'll be able to put together some evidence based on that, rather than actually having to go through that proof process, which a lot of other companies may have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are, as you say, banging ahead with experience and all-weather operation. I got to meet some of the team at the Lake Victoria Challenge, and you see the aircraft on our website. You see pictures of it and you see videos of it, and you think, oh yeah, well that's nice, isn't it? But then when you see it in the flesh and you see the detail, the fine detail that was in the thing, including having, I love the app for when it checks the control surfaces and it looks at the control surfaces and sees if there's any issues with the servos based on QR codes moving up and down, and if there is, they don't bin the flight. They've got racks of component parts, wings, bodies, tails. They just pull another one off the rack, shove that in, and then that flight goes. So they've made it very modular, and it's constructed each time for each flight. I've said it before, but they do things like the GPS for the aircraft is in the battery, and the battery's on charge, so the GPS never goes off. They pull the battery off the rack, they put it in, and there you are. It's already got a lock. It's all the stuff like that is kind of obvious when you hear it, but nobody's doing it. So yeah, it's impressive.
Definitely. The part for me, which I still don't understand how on earth they're doing it yet. I've not really looked into it properly, but the landing, the sort of line landing, so how on earth they're managing to go and fly that accurately into a line so that it snags on the tail and then drops down is pretty remarkable. And then
it just flicks it up just before it gets there, but it's going fast enough so that if it does miss the wire, just like an aircraft carrier, it flies through. It keeps going. It's not in a critical state where it's going to crash or it's slowed down so much.
Yeah, it's got the hook like an aircraft carrier. Got the hook, and then throttles up as it hits it, and it's typical aircraft carrier sort of setup.
Yeah, it's very clever, and they launch 5 aircraft at a time, and when they recover them, the aircraft talk to each other and say, well, actually, a minute, I've got a little bit more battery than you. I can hang around down the bottom of town. And it's all completely autonomous. So they work out the landing routine to recover the 5 aircraft when they have to. The aircraft do it between themselves. So I thought that, well, I've said this loads of times now, I thought they were mad having a fixed landing and takeoff point, but now I realize they own the landing and takeoff. You're not going from some unprepared place in the some random time, and you're not really sure where you're landing. No, you know exactly where you're landing every time. I'm going to get Philip in after this because he's at AUVSI and he's waiting patiently. But they actually recover the energy from the launch rail as well. When it fires off the rail, it charges stuff as well. It's just all very, very clever. They're quite far. They're a couple of years ahead of everybody else. But anyway, let's grab Philip in. Philip, Philip, hello, Philip. Hello,
g'day.
How you doing, mate?
Hey, Tom, why don't you just come around here and be in the thing? Which booth are you in? That looks.
This is really busy. I'll be right there.
He's round the back of the booth there, isn't he? He's round behind you in the sign there, isn't he? That's what he is, isn't it? Yeah. That's
sorry,
it.
I didn't have my badge with me. Security was blocking me there.
Oh, that's all right. You're just still from the office out the front. Yeah.
Okay. I'll meet you out there.
Cool.
Actually, what we should get you to do, Philip, is walk to what you think is other than your own products, what you think is the coolest thing in the room. But before we do that,
that would be difficult because I haven't walked around the room yet. So.
Oh, haven't you?
No.
It's day 2 for you, I think, at the show, isn't it?
It's technically day 1 of the show. We had build up yesterday, so yeah, this is day 1. So yeah.
Okay. Now it's grand that Tom's here because between the two of you. Oh, hello.
That's Jonathan. we got the SpectreWorks guys over here. So
Very cool. Now the ADSB in the bottom of the cube. Tell us about that quickly. That's old news now. That is old news.
Yeah, it is old news. All right, here we go. So, meanwhile, where's this thing? What are we looking at here? My GPS is... There we go. That's our new GPS.
Okay, and what is the new GPS? Is this from the press release that you failed to send me?
This is the press release that I haven't quite sent yet. I'm just trying to figure out how I turn the camera around. There we go. So this is the new Here Pro.
Otherwise known as the disco ball.
A disco ball, because, you know, it won't be clear in the actual product. This is a 3D print version, but, well, not 3D print, but aluminium machined version. So there we go. Yeah, but moving on.
Special, yeah, all right. Tell us about that. What's special about that? It's just another GPS. They're everywhere. I can buy them for $8 from Banggood.
Exactly. So this one has a H7 processor on board. It has full IMU. It's got an SD card on there. It's got L1, L2, E5, so triple frequency. It can do concurrent GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Baidu. Yeah, so all the above and a bit more. Runs at anywhere between 5 volts and 60 volts. And it's CAN bus. Oh, and it's IP68 rated as well. So just a few things.
And the Profi LEDs, right? Those are,
yes.
Can you adjust the colors?
That is the plan. I don't know if you can see at the moment, it's doing some flashy things at the moment. Doesn't show up very well on the camera, unfortunately. It's a bit bright. But
I think there's going to be an app that you can actually configure some sort of combination of whatever you want, right? Yeah, and they're all RGB LEDs, so they're all totally customizable.
Yeah, because we all know that an aeroplane is definitely going to fly better with more LEDs flashing.
Of course,
it's very important.
And would they be using artificial intelligence and blocks? In fact, was that a chain of blockchain running around the top?
That was a chain of block LEDs. Yes, definitely a blockchain of LEDs.
A blockchain of LEDs.
It uses artificial intelligence because, well, it makes a decision of something and it's not human. So I suppose by definition, we've got that one covered too.
You know, Philip, what you could do is actually have the 2 GPSs on the ends for a heading, and then have one blinking red and one green.
That is a built-in feature already. So
we
haven't got the GPS working, but we've got that working.
Isn't lead really heavy, or is it counteracted by the fact that it's lights?
Oh, lead. Very good.
It's light lead, so it's neutral buoyancy.
So that's your new GPS, and how much does it cost? People are going to ask that.
We haven't quite locked it down, but we're pretty sure we're locking it down to about 600. So it's not a cheapie.
Okay.
It's a cool 6 times the price of our current ones. Yeah.
So it's 3-band. Is it? And it supports RTK, I presume.
Yes, it is RTK. Yeah, and it does moving baseline and fixed baseline concurrently. So you can do compassing and attitude and all that sort of stuff if you feel like spending lots of money and having lots of them on your aircraft at the same time as doing RTK to a base as well. So, yeah.
The question I've got as an ex-surveyor, though, is it going to be easy to integrate it into aircraft? Because one of the things I found is a lot of these RTK systems is actually, it's all about the delay between it taking the snapshot, and then you've got the sort of moment arm between your receiver and your camera center point. Is that bit sort of sorted quite nicely?
At release, no. Just be blatantly honest on that one. We've got another module that we're working on at the moment, which is a synchronized CAN device for doing the timing of the camera information. So we've got the timing between the GPSs and the CAN devices is all being synchronized over the bus now. So that in theory, will fix all of those problems. And because it actually has an IMU and all of that stuff on board, it's pretty much a full flight controller on board the GPS anyway. So there's a bunch of things we'll be able to do there, and it has the local SD card for storage as well. So we'll be able to do all sorts of fun stuff there. That's all up to Jonathan Challenger, so he's got to make all of that work. So I gave him the hardware; it's good.
Do you know if he's using the new AP peripheral library?
No, definitely not.
That's the next round. Yeah, it was just brand new release, so that's why to have products on it if it's brand new.
So Sorry, Philip. After you.
I was just going to say, AP Periph is going to be good for your simple drivers and stuff like that. We have fairly grand schemes for what this thing's going to do in the long term. So yeah, we'll release all those secrets later.
So for the ignorant, i.e. me, at what point do you not call that a companion computer with a GPS then?
I think it's more, at what point don't you call it another autopilot?
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not sure where that point is, but it's getting pretty close.
But you're not expecting it to do the flying, though, are you? I mean, it's sat there logging its stuff and doing its funky thing, or can it do the flying?
Look, there's no reason it couldn't. If we've got CAN servos and CAN everything else, there's no reason it couldn't. The thing it's missing is a vibration-isolated IMU. If it had that, it's everything.
Is there a fixed IMU?
Yes.
Well, it meets the minimum requirements at least.
It does. It does everything needed to fly. That's not its intention, but I asked our software team, how much computing power they wanted for their wish list, and they said as much as possible. So we gave them the biggest processor that's in our inventory. So.
Okay, but for surveyors like James, then, but it's going to be quite a capable unit when you've got it all squared down to do stuff in flight, whilst the other your main autopilot keeps the thing the right way up. That'll be logging stuff in a surveyor-friendly way.
That's right. So basically, knowing where the camera is and where the camera's pointing is the critical bit. So everything sort of working together and cooperating is the key there. So if your camera's on a gimbal, knowing exactly what the gimbal's doing and why is absolutely important for getting that GPS location to match what is actually happening with the camera.
Talking about cameras then, and I want to go on to the cubes after that. Talking about cameras, so surely it would be good if you were working with a manufacturer of some sort of gimbal system to integrate it very nicely.
That would be really good, and hopefully we'll be able to come on soon and announce anything along the lines of that. Basically, I mean, we've talked about CubePilot before, what that is, and it's a bit more of an ecosystem than what we had before. Like ArduPilot is obviously at the heart of everything we do. All of our stuff runs ArduPilot, but with things like the HearLink and stuff like this, it's sort of branching a bit beyond the base of ArduPilot. So, and there's other hardware that we don't make that we need for systems. And if we're not going to make it, then we want to partner with people who do. So the big announcement here is our partnership with AeroVironment, and obviously our partnership with uBlocks on this as well. So that all becomes part of the CubePilot sort of stuff.
Okay, so this GPS is an official partnership with uBlocks, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, and the UAV stuff is the receiver in the base of the the carrier board, and that's what Tom has been involved with the code for that as well, I believe.
He has. Tom did some awesome work about 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago, Tom, or longer?
He's not listening.
No, he's away.
Sorry. Yeah, it's been more like 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We got.
I did all the alpha. I did all the alpha work on ArduPilot for before the ping was actually even released. We had it all. We're part of their portfolio coming out.
Initial release. Yeah. So I mean, I've been working with the AeroVironment guys for about 5 years now. We actually tried to negotiate to get a UAvionics ping as a standard feature on Solo when Solo was going to be released. But unfortunately, a particular CEO of a particular company couldn't see the value in collision avoidance in aircraft or anything like that, or where the market would be interested in that. So, yeah.
And basically, what that means, though, so in the carrier board, the carrier board is the bit that links the autopilot to the world, and that carrier board's got a receiver in it, and the RG-Pilot firmware, if it sees an aircraft on there, will make a decision on whether to get out of the way or take an action based on that. Is that a long-winded way of saying it?
Yeah. So basically, being able to receive the data, basically, if a helicopter's flying along that's actually fitted with it, that's our next challenge, is convincing general aviation to actually put transponders on. Another conversation. Assuming they're actually doing the right thing and they're transmitting, we can detect they're coming. The first stage is to warn the pilot that, hey, you're potentially on a collision course with a manned aircraft. Could you please, do the right thing, get the hell out of there? And then the next stage, which can be enabled, which does need to be configured for your particular aircraft, though, is the actual avoidance. And you can set it up to actually get the hell out of the way if the pilot fails to actually move his drone. It's a very simple system that doesn't really involve the manned aircraft having to have any awareness of what else is going on. It just means we stay the hell out of the way. It's a hot topic, and it's a topic where there's so much speculation and bull crap, as we've all discussed on many conversations, where there's an unnecessary level of fear in the industry on this topic. Then there are some simple solutions for people that do need to operate where there is going to be manned aircraft around. So we basically want to encourage full-size aviation to do the right thing, and we want to give the tools to our customers to at least be able to be aware of what's going on so that they don't make a silly mistake. Because if this finally does happen, it will be most likely a silly mistake that someone's made. If it's anything other than a silly mistake, we're talking about a topic that laws aren't going to stop anyone being involved in. So yeah, we can protect the innocent from making a stupid mistake.
And just to be clear again, so people know, there's a receiver on board. It is not transmitting out the position on 1090 on the ADSB sort of bandwidth. It is a receiver that hears the other aircraft and gets out of the way. I'm quite surprised the number of people I'm seeing popping up saying, "Oh, I bought a UAvionics ping and I switched it on, and airports aren't seeing me or whatever." And they're not coding them, they're not licensing them, they're just buying them. It's madness.
Yeah. I think we should stick with transponders should be a certified device for a certified aircraft that actually needs it. If you're flying below 400 feet and you're not right at the edge of a runway, full-size aircraft don't need to know where you are. If a helicopter's coming, get the hell out of the way of the helicopter. It's as simple as that. We don't need to have anything more complicated than that.
Well, did you see the recent consultation on from the CAA? And I'm not talking about the hot topic, but the one on electronic conspicuity. So one thing that the CAA have recently put out is they're looking at mandating conspicuity in certain geographical regions, and that doesn't exclude altitude. So the way that I think this is going to end up going is we're going to go and get Gary's going to be extremely happy and get his no GA, but not quite no GA below 2K. But I reckon we're going to go and get to a point where below 500 feet, you're going to need either a transponder or some kind of device that's pinging out your position at any point. That's the only way that I can see us actually doing BV loss kind of activities outside of segregated airspace or sort of routinely without sort of special permissions.
Yeah, look, I think ADSB in actually gives us most of what we need for EV loss or BV loss, because unless we're worried about crashing into an Amazon drone, which is a completely different topic altogether, where we're talking about crashing into manned aviation. If manned aviation is doing the right thing and has a transponder, we don't have to tell them where we are. We just need to get the hell out of the way of them. That system works. It's proven. It's been around for years. My theory on that one is, why reinvent the wheel at the moment? We've got about, 200 companies trying to do their own UTM methods and this, that, and the other. They're all fighting over what should be standard, what should be this, what should be that. They want to bring in new technology that didn't exist, is unproven. I always start with what works. And so our theory is, if we give it away for free to everyone, then it's no skin off anyone's nose if it doesn't work. And if it does work, then, we prove that at our end of the industry, at the RC end and the drone end of the industry, we can actually be more responsible than is required. Maybe the rest of the manned industry might be able to follow and actually start fitting ADS-B out to their vehicles.
So I didn't realize that it was for free. So
I was going to say, you've asked the question. Is there no extra cost on the new carrier board?
So the new carrier board, this is what is our new standard carrier board. So there's another leak that might be shown on this new standard carrier board of what becomes our standard one. But we basically want to make sure that everyone has this and doesn't have to think about it. We don't want it to be a burden for anyone. We just want it to be something that everyone just moves over to.
But you're never going to succeed in this business. You can't do that. You've got to have some renderings, and you can't do that. That's against ARPA's rule.
I don't know. He's got like the NASCAR stickers down the sides.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Rendering.
Rendering. Oh, good. Oh,
that's not real.
Goodness. Oh, good.
This is real, but that's
it's also like this big.
No. In this industry, renderings win. Real stuff doesn't win.
Wait a second. Get the scale right. There you go. You happy, Tom? Is that better?
So
you're one step ahead of the curve as well, because I don't know if you've seen the new EASA regs, because there's two things that they're requiring for you to fit within the standard sort of set of permissions, is geofencing and remote ID. So that could potentially be used for the remote ID component. So I can kind of see those two components becoming a lot more standard.
Sort of not, because we don't transmit. So because we're receive only, so we don't meet the remote ID side of things. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to build something that fits one country's requirements when that country's only going to change their requirements soon, because it is just a one country system. The European regulations at the moment are just a bunch of hot air twisting around and around in circles. The regulations that I'm actually following and we are building equipment for and we are focusing our energy on is, of all countries, India. They have the best system that I can see in existence with their digital sky. It's simple. It's a pre-approval, no approval, no fly system, but there's no paperwork, there's no red tape. It's just a really easy system. So we've got Siddharth working on that a fair bit of his time, and we're working closely with all the Indians on the various Indian stakeholders on that. And I actually think if that does everything it's meant to do and gets off the ground properly, that a bunch of other governments are probably going to look at it, because it just removes their overhead, it removes their risk, it removes responsibility from government, which politicians love. Whereas any UTM side of thing that's being pushed at the moment involves equipment and maintenance and chasing people down, and it's just complicated.
And perhaps purchasing custom-made transmitters of a certain type that you may have invested a lot of money in companies that make those things in China for.
Politicians like that, because that means the lobbyists get their way and whatnot. So it's...
it depends who's lobbying louder and whether those lobbyists are actually, like, there's certain companies that are lobbying, and I won't mention a particular one because I think I'm at a particular exhibition, but some of them may not be doing all they can for the industry.
So best case scenario for a politician is all the manufacturers hardware manufacturers lobby at the same time to the same politician because one of them's going to win, and that's the politician.
Unfortunately, you're right. Yeah, so we're not talking to any politicians. We're just doing. We figure it's easier. I don't have to deal with politicians, so I win.
So the bottom line is there's no extra cost for ADSB in now in the carrier boards.
If I was to say truly no extra cost, I'd be $12 out.
Okay, all right, $12.
Our standard price has been $238 US for a standard carrier board with a cube black. Our next standard carrier board will be $250, but it's quite possible that it's going to be a different coloured cube on our standard that we'll get to soon.
All right, well, let's run down the colours of cubes in a minute, because I saw you had a line of them there, so it's a good idea if you show us the colours of cubes. But I'm also going to ask you to make carrier boards, smaller carrier boards, also with ADSB in.
Not at this point, but you know we've got a few other carrier boards here while I'm here that it's definitely worth having a look at. This one is really cool. That's a carrier board from SpectreWorks. It's actually for this aircraft here, which is really cool. Those connectors are worth more than a standard carrier board each, but you know, keeps military people happy. Yeah, so that's about the most complex carrier board that I've seen so far, but it is very nice. Does a whole bunch of cool things. Yeah.
And then the lineup of cubes that you had there, your line of cubes, can you?
Oh, yeah.
Because of course, aren't they all grounded? Can't we fly? Is it the end of the world still?
Look, I can cover that off briefly. It is the end of the world still. There we go. So we have a lovely, colourful array. It's nice to be inclusive. Rainbows are a popular thing at the moment, so we've got that covered. So basically, these three are pretty much identical. That's got 5-volt PWM, but other than that, they're all the same. That one's 3 times the price of that one. I think I've covered this off with you.
For those who don't know, it's coloured blue, and blue paint is very expensive. That's the reason, isn't it?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, it's also made in America, but it's definitely cost more because of the blue paint. We've got the Mini, which is the purple, which is just with no vibration isolation, and that's got a different carrier board on it as well, the little mini carrier board. All of them can fit on any carrier board, so which is pretty cool. Then we got the yellow, which is coming, which is running the F7 processor, so that's twice as fast and twice as much RAM as the black. And then we've got the orange, which is after the yellow, which is twice as fast again as that, and twice as much memory again as that.
So it's still the F7, but is that the H7 or that F?
H7 in that one, F7 in that one. Yeah. So there you go. And you know, I don't know if you can see, but when these GPSs are doing things, they're doing things perfectly in sync with each other. That's all part of the new time synchronization over CAN code. So yeah, it's just a demo of it there. It's doing police lights there because, you know, every drone needs that. Yeah.
Well, I bet if you're in France, you can. Wasn't it France that wanted to flash Morse code, I think, or something like that?
Wasn't that Ford did a patent on that?
Ford did that as well, didn't they? Yes.
Yeah, they did a patent, and to be honest, I actually like it. That's probably one of the simplest and most logical drone ID systems, because you could use any little app on any phone without actually having any special hardware.
Or you could even learn Morse code, for instance.
Oh, you could learn Morse code, yeah. You know, that's cool. I'd support that one. Yeah.
But if it's drone to drone talking, it should just be blinking infrared. Morse code in infrared. Yeah.
Just imagine all the televisions in a street changing channels.
You could hack it with a universal remote control. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Off down to the hardware store.
Does your remote have Navlink on it?
Yeah. Absolutely. So how's the show been for you? How's the show? Oh, well, tell us what is the status with, because people will ask the status with...
Status with the cubes. Basically, the service bulletin as it stands is the code has gone into master for copter, rover, and plane for doing the detection of IMUs that are missing, which is obviously a fairly important thing, and also to cope if a IMU goes missing in flight. So obviously we discovered a pretty bad bug after the hardware bug was turned up, where the EKF was surviving and switching correctly, just how it should, but the actual attitude solution was switching to the broken IMU rather than the good one, which is obviously a bit of a problem when it comes to trying to keep a copter level. So that bug was found and fixed, which means that if your cube does have a fault, that the fail-safe system in there will actually function now.
I think we actually just released
that worked.
Copter though. That does have that.
We've released Copter, we've released Plane, and Randy just released Rover today. So,
yeah.
With that, yeah.
And Nintendo Tracker.
And Nintendo Tracker.
Because, losing an IMU on a Nintendo Tracker is so scary. Yeah. So that's the code side of things. On the hardware side of things, basically the root cause of the problem is that our PCB supplier had decided to try and make his processes a little bit more efficient, and had been drilling holes with a drill bit that was too blunt. And that's basically what it comes down to. So we've got a case where, because they've drilled it with that, it's actually had an effect on the flex layer in between the 4-layer section of the board, and that's stopped the copper from bonding to the board as well as it should. And it's left a stress riser basically in the via. And of course, on the IMU, we've got a heater there. So as the heater heats this board up to 45 or 60 degrees and back down again, it's thermal cycling this already stressed area, and after a while it's cracking. So we go from something that passes perfectly well on our test jigs to a board that doesn't work, weeks or months later, which is obviously not something that we want. So we've now got a test in ArduPilot as a pre-arm. We've got a test in Mission Planner that also checks, and we obviously have the failover code and the verification in flight. So we've got 3 levels of checking now to verify whether this has happened. We've discovered now 24 boards that this is affecting, but we've actually grounded about 6,000 boards. So we hope to get people flying, but we want people to realise that at the end of the day, as much as we like our hardware to be known as a very trusted hardware, it is still a hardware that can fail. In this case, we know the failure mode and we know what the situation is, but everyone should be flying as if their system could fail, no matter what they're doing. So in reality, I'd like to think that our flight situation is no more risky now than it used to be. And in fact, it's probably safer because the actual code is better than it was. So fly cautiously is where we're at. And if it does give you an error on Mission Planner that your cube is misbehaving, then there's a little link to click, and that'll send us some information, and we'll add that to the list and try and get to the point where we can get some new cubes out to people that have actually got the bug. So we're estimating about 1% of that group will have the problem. So it's a relatively small number of cubes that will have the problem. About 60 all up is what we're estimating.
Fair play to you for putting out that airworthiness directive, or I can't remember quite what you called it. That was a brave move, and I applaud you. Even though I've known you for years, so I should say stuff like that. But no, that's a brave move. It's a brave move to do stuff like that, and people will overreact and did overreact, and
actually,
but it has to be done. It has to be
pretty
done.
good. Yeah, the reaction's been pretty good. We've had one person who you quite nicely schooled, who then ran away, so that was good, on a forum that just went silly about it. But overall, everyone's been really good. I think most people realise that it is much better to be on the ground being pissed off that you're not in the air than being in the air being pissed off that you're not stationary on the ground nicely. So I think that's a little paraphrase from a rather ancient aviation saying, but
Yes.
Well, I want to commend you on your transparency on all of this. This has been very, as Gary was saying, this is very impressive. I've seen several other companies that have made autopilots and other things that don't do that. They make our equipment that's has some sort of generation of it that has some sort of inherent problem with it and a defect, and they just change to the next version, and that's the next batch, and they fail, and they just like, well, that's the way it works. It's you get what you pay for or whatever, and there's no accountability at all. So props to you for that.
Thanks for that. Look, at the end of the day, I mean, if we, let's just pretend for the argument's sake, if we hid this and people started crashing, it comes out eventually anyway, and then you just look like an idiot, and you look like a fool. So there's a big aviation company, I think, based in Seattle that knows all about that at the moment. So, things go wrong.
They used to be big. I'm not sure how they are now.
Yes, it's smaller by the moment. Yes.
Look, I still back them when it comes to which airliner I would prefer to fly on. I'd still take them any day. But at the end of the day, things go wrong. Stuff happens. In this case, I mean, obviously, my first thing was down at what have I designed wrong here? What have I messed up in the thing? So, I was sort of happy to find out that it wasn't actually the design that was bad. But it was something completely out of our control. And now how do we make sure that in the future that we can even find these things that are outside of our control? So we're designing a bunch of new test jigs now that will be running every single cube through to actually age each cube before they go out the door. So, overall, this is going to be better for us. It's going to be better for the customers. And yeah, it's frustrating that we're now in a situation where we don't quite know how we're going to handle dealing with various customers that may be demanding a little bit more than we can give them right at the moment. But I'd rather be in that situation than, having someone who's using our cube in a manned aircraft, which I know we say they're not allowed to, but we know they do. I'd rather not be one of those cubes that fails. So, yeah.
Absolutely. In the comments, what is the correct store for all of this hardware?
If you go to cubepilot.org, there's in the announcements there's a link that shows all our resellers. I prefer not to actually name any resellers because we've got like 160. We don't have time to name them all. I don't remember every single one. So I try not to be too biased towards any of them. But there's plenty of choices all over the world.
And then a bit further up in the comments, I saw Chris iForce 2D. I hope and make another video, Chris. Nice to see you in the comments there. Not seen you for a while. Now, if you'll stay with us if you can there, Philip, I'm going to move on to the hot topic, which is probably going to last 2 hours now. Bruce, let's bring you in to kick this one off. What's wrong with what's being proposed in the UK? £16.50, that seems very reasonable to me. Why can't we all do that?
Absolutely nothing wrong with it, Gary. I think you're just a bunch of whinging poms. That's all it is, just whinging poms. No. I think we all know what's wrong with it. The CAA is going to buy a Raspberry Pi and a plug-in 1 terabyte hard drive and charge it 2.8 million quid a year to keep it running, which is kind of a bit over the top. But this whole thing has been so poorly thought through, because suddenly it's going to criminalise lots of people. I mean, how many people have got, an old toy plane, model plane in the garage or in the back of a wardrobe somewhere? They inherited it when the dad died, and because their dad was keen, they haven't thrown it out because it's a memory thing, sitting in the wardrobe there. Do they realise that as of December 1st, if they haven't registered as an owner of that, they are liable to a £1,000 fine. They become criminals automatically because they haven't registered, because they look at the newspapers and it says drone licensing and they think, oh no, it's just a toy plane, it's not a drone. But it's a drone, because the CAA don't know their ass from their elbow. Demonetised. So it's kind of this whole lot of unintended consequences going on here. And I made the suggestion in the rant, or no, the coffee chat that you probably saw, that the BMFA, because there's no blanket exemption for them, they should just register as the operator of all the drones under their control through the membership, and then pay what, £16.50 to the civil aviation, instead of having their 30 or 40,000 members all pay £16.50. People have come back and said, oh, no, you can't do that because, you know, the owner is the one that has to register. And I thought, well, hang on, here's another problem, another unintended consequence. If you've got a commercial operation, and commercial operators still have to register under this new thing, you've got, maybe a company might have 4 or 5 drones, and they're owned, or have to be registered, the owner has to register them. So is that the company, the limited liability company, does that register them, or is someone in the company nominated as the person that registers the drones? In which case, do they have to be present on site when each one of those drones is being flown as the operator? In which case, if you've got 5 drones operated simultaneously in 5 locations, how do they do that? There are so many poorly thought out aspects of this registration thing that'll come back to bite them on the arse if they don't get themselves sorted. And the big problem I've got is that they are not separating drones from model aircraft, because as everyone says, model aircraft never been a problem. We don't have quarter scale Spitfires attacking 747s on approach to Heathrow, but the CAA chooses not to do it. And the other thing that amazed me was, I saw a BBC story this morning, the CAA is saying, as an EU member state, we have to do this. We have to produce a register. It's a requirement of the EU. And I'm thinking, has no one told them about Brexit? Yeah, has no one told the CAA about Brexit? They don't realise that they won't be a member state soon, so why waste all this money when you don't have to? Oh, it's crazy. But the other thing is, they say 170,000 people, all the pricings are based on 170,000 people signing up. And from the feedback I've got, they're never going to get that many people. So many people are just going to say, no, I don't care, until they license bicycles or until they start enforcing licensing and other things, I'm not going to waste my money on it. So they're going to have this £2.8 million system, and they're probably going to get maybe 10 or 20,000 registrations. And so who's going to carry the bill for that? The CIA are digging themselves a hole. And I won't rant, but I have.
Well, you'll get me started on the Australian stuff. I mean, $16.50 seems awesome to me, because it's going to cost me $160 per drone that I have to register in Australia with the new regulations that are coming there. I'd actually be happy in Australia if they brought in this stupid British system, but the point is that none of it's necessary. None of it's achieving anything. I hate to say, but the Americans actually had this one right. Points to USA on this one. What is it? $5 a pilot, or if it's a commercial one, it's $5 a drone at that point. But it's a mere technicality, and it's only if you fly it. Like, this whole thing of you own it, you got to register it. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in there? That basically, it's not to do with ownership; it's to do with flying. So it's Article 94D basically states that it's only if you fly the aircraft do you need it to be registered. So if you've got one in the garage, you don't actually have to have it registered. So that is a key point, I think, that you need to be aware of. That in that case, then that wouldn't apply. But I understand, and I feel sympathetic to those that I think it mainly affects the remote control sort of aircraft industry and young people. They're probably the people who are going to get hit hardest, I think, because I remember when I was about 12 years old, and I took out an aircraft which cost me about 20 quid. Took it down to the park and flew it around, and now it wouldn't cost me 20 quid, it would cost me £36.50, and I'd have to fill out a load of paperwork and get one of my parents to go and sign me off as being allowed to do it. So it does introduce new barriers, but I think we have to try and look at it in a balanced kind of context, and understand that if we are going to progress as an industry, are we saying that registration isn't needed? Are we saying that a digital, a digital ID isn't required for us to progress as an industry? And this is what we're really talking about: is for drones, a digital identity, and this fits in with the whole electronic conspicuity piece. It fits in with the UTM. I don't have all the answers here, but there are two sides to the argument, I think, and whether you can say that drone registration isn't needed, I think is a difficult question or a difficult thing to say, but certainly the costs being pretty steep.
But isn't one half of that equation at the moment being the industry, shall we say? Isn't that getting a bit too much leverage out of this? Aren't they displacing too many folks? Why should the industry get a ticket to move stuff out of the way?
Well, I think one of the answers to that that I think Ian Hudson pointed out was, I might have been here, I'm not sure, but who are we protecting here? This fee is not to protect us. It's actually to protect the mad. That's pretty cool. I just got handed this.
Oh, so you get a can of that with every new GPS? Is that right?
Delivers accuracy down to the centimeter level. And I've got no idea what you're going to be drinking if you open this can.
Well, that is the most. That is the most. That is the most expendable swag I've ever seen.
That is
why don't you
use it and throw it away?
Why don't you just throw it at somebody and see how accurate it is? Maybe that's what it means. Maybe you can chuck that can with high accuracy.
I actually have from the China conference. I have headphones.
I don't know. You're distracting us with swag. Let's get back to the point at hand here. Come on now.
So look, the actual registration in Australia, when we filled out our stuff on what we thought about all the proposals, I actually 100% support the registration by itself. The original discussion was a registration that was going to be free. That basically they've just got the names and numbers up there so that if you get a cop comes over and says, "What are you doing?" you can say, "Here's this." It just shows that you've got some idea what you're doing, and they can go, "Yeah, all right, moving along," and that's it. I'm okay with that. But when they start throwing $160 a pop because it needs to fund the industry, when the whole fear is about our impact on the general aviation and commercial airline industry, if this is about safety, aren't they the ones benefiting from it? And therefore, should they not be some of the ones that are bearing this cost? They're putting a responsibility on us, who have so far, as an industry, had zero incidents that matter. Gatwick, what drone? The evidence says there was no freaking drone at Gatwick. Moving on. We've got an area where we've got hysteria in the industry. We've got people being scared for absolutely no logical reason. And we've got British Airline Pilots Association who are, for some reason, terrified that, our drones are going to start flying 747s and give them all an extended holiday. It's dumb. It's just silly. So if we're protecting their jobs and we're protecting their industry, then, maybe they should be paying.
Yeah, that's what I said in my little rant. And the other thing is that for James, I'm looking at this document, the discussion document, and it's got how to register, and it says, if you are responsible for drones and model aircraft, you must register. So you say in the other article that it's only if you're flying them. Well, this discussion paper says something different. So again, the discussion paper doesn't seem to be very accurate. It's quite ambiguous. It's quite, for something that's supposed to be a guideline to getting responses, it's full of shite, to be honest, because it says you only need a single registration if you both fly and are responsible. But which registration? Do you register as the operator or do you register as the flyer? Because there's two paths in that flow diagram, but this says there's a third one, but it doesn't define it. It doesn't tell you which one, which either. This is such a poorly crafted document that I think maybe it's just designed to confuse, and therefore the responses won't be very good, and they can discount them at their leisure. But it's such a botch. And if you look at it, New Zealand, we don't have drone registration. How many people have died in New Zealand as a result of the use of multi-rotor drones or any kind of model aircraft? Well, none. So is registration really necessary? We have about the same number of incidents per capita as the USA, which has registration, as other countries with registration, which plan to have registration. So the registration thing is a feel-good measure. It's designed to make people, the general great unwashed, say, oh, look, the government's doing something to protect us from all these evil baby killing drones. But where's the risk analysis? Where's the risk analysis that shows registration produces a positive outcome? And you know, it's like, excuse me, but we're not actually doing the science. We're not actually doing things properly. It's all done from you know, gut reactions and knee jerks, and nothing ever good ever comes of that. You mix public knee jerk reaction with politicians and bureaucrats, and all you get is a giant mess that costs everyone a fortune.
I think
we offended Tom.
Go on, go ahead.
I just said apparently we've offended Tom. He's gone.
He's like that.
I think it's tricky because we're in a situation now where when aircraft were developed, we kind of accepted that people would die and you know, there were accidents in the development of those aircraft and the development of where regulations are now. I think we're currently living in a world where, you know, accidents aren't acceptable in the development of new technology. And this is really what we're up against. It's a change in the way that we sort of look at the development of new technology. With regards to sort of these new rules, I can see it from both sides of it. I can see, you know, what we want to do is we want to introduce some kind of way of stopping, not necessarily the people who are out there to go and commit terrorism or things like that, because this isn't going to stop them. What it's designed to stop is those people where, if you go on YouTube and you type in drone A380 takeoff, where someone's sitting at 1,000 feet on the approach path to Heathrow and videoing a drone.
Stop that.
Well,
how is regulation of any sort, registration, whatever, going to stop someone who is already blatantly breaking the law? Like, if they're flying at that height, they are breaking the law. It's as simple as that. Even the law of common sense, they clearly don't have the law of common sense. They're not going to obey the law. The incidents in Australia where people have flown near airports where they have, you know, Sydney Airport has got a huge number of drone incursions that have been reported. Now, if they're real, these are people that are already breaking the current laws. There's already rules. There's already, like, and certification and registration makes no difference whatsoever. If I'm on a car and I'm breaking the rules and the police pull me over, all the registration means that I've got one less charge. But, you know, if you crash into someone and you're registered or not registered, it doesn't make it safer to crash into someone because you're registered. Like, if you're a criminal, you're a criminal. It's as simple as that. And
so
the law-abiding people are the ones being stuffed.
What I would say is, what are the reasons why we have a driving license?
We have a driving license because we have to have a method of tracking down people to find them, but we get pulled over and we're right there. In a drone, it's a lot harder. If you want to actually drive, if you actually want to fly a drone that's unregistered and you want to do criminal activities with it, it doesn't matter how much licensing is there, you can do that. It's harder to do that in a car. I know Tesla's trying to make it a little bit easier to do that in a car, but at the moment, if you want to do something bad in a car, you've got to physically be in the car. So the police officer can pull you over and he can look at your license and he can say, you've been a naughty boy, I'll take your license, you're not allowed to drive anymore. It's a means of punishment. Now, we have to do that because we have evidence that car drivers are incompetent fools, and even law-abiding citizens do pretty stupid things in cars and kill people all day, every day. But drones are not killing people. There's not even... I mean, people are cutting their fingers on propellers, and there's a couple of dramatic shots going on around where people have hit their face with a propeller, but it's not an all-day, everyday thing. We're not losing people. It's just not happening. The fear is completely out of proportion to the responses that are being given.
So what I would say to that is I've got a slightly different perspective on it. Like, I would say that the reason why we have a driving license is because you then don't have any excuse for not knowing the rules of the road. You've been through the tests, you've been taught how you should drive, you've been taught that you should stick to the speed limits, you should indicate when you're turning, and all the rest of it. And if you then go and say, well, I didn't know that, then you've got no excuse, because you've basically gone through a process where you've proven that you've passed a test which shows that you know that. So
Yeah, but
I would say that it's basically providing a sort of guarantee that you understand the rules, and then it comes down to one matter. The only thing that you need to know is whether you need to get registered or not. And as long as people are aware that they need to be registered at the point of sale, then there's no excuse. There's no excuse then as to whether you know about the rules, or you shouldn't fly above 400 feet, or you shouldn't be 30 meters away from people when you're taking off, and all the rest of it. So I think it's more about trying to prove compliance rather than those other things we talk about.
I don't agree
but you're
with
back
that.
to proving
Yeah.
compliance on something that there's no evidence of lack of compliance.
Yeah, but I disagree as well, because if you took the average driver who's had his license for 20 years and asked them to resit the theory test, they'd fail, because they knew at the time. It's a snapshot, so it's not a guarantee that people know the rules and the regulations. It's a snapshot that once they might have known them once. Also, the other problem we have is, as has been said, that we're not dealing with something that's taking lives on a regular basis. It's something that justifies that kind of thing. We don't get tested on the law of the land, like are you allowed to steal? Are you allowed to stab people? Are you allowed to whatever? We don't have tests. We don't have to be registered to go out on the street when we could commit a crime. And there's a lot of far more serious crimes.
A registered knife stabber.
Yeah. And so what's happening here is that it's not serving any real point. And that's the whole thing. It is just, as I say, the whole knee-jerk thing. But we're creating new crimes as well, because let's say, look, it's when someone goes and burgles a house or robs a bank, they don't use their own car, they steal a car, right? So if someone's going to do something bad, like drop contraband over a prison wall, they're not going to register and use their own drone. They're going to go and steal someone else's drone. So now a new, more popular crime will be stealing drones, because now you can do nefarious things under the cover of anonymity. So we're actually increasing the likelihood of crime by registering drones. I mean, it's a counterproductive measure.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I in essence, I kind of agree with both of you. I think, at the end of the day, drones have killed 0 people.
That's all right. You can just stop that. You can just stop the sentence there. You just said you agreed with us. We're good.
There will be a but eventually. I'll guarantee that. They've killed 0 people. We've had 0 mid-air collisions. There might have been a few major injuries from them, but they've not really made the news headlines. But what we've got to understand is what fights do we want to pick with these people, and I think drone registration is something that's going to be inevitable. If we want to see our industry progress forwards, I think it's something that, for the sake of £16, as a commercial drone operator, I don't think, I still see it as expensive, and I still see the 2.8 million as way over the top. But £16 is, if that's going to determine whether you're profitable or not at the end of the year, then you've probably got a few other problems other than the £16 charge. What I would say is that we need to look closely on how it affects younger people, because that part, which it hasn't been clarified yet, and the CAA have said they are going to provide extra clarification within the next sort of few months to go and describe how that process will happen. That is part of the consultation. There is a clause in there which sort of talks about that they're going to be releasing more information. But that's probably, for me, the sort of more critical part is we don't want to put people off getting into the industry. But at the same time, I think we do need to pick our fights. And, in the grand scheme of it, I can understand why the BMFA are a little bit annoyed. But, what are we going to do about it? It's going to happen. Maybe we can reduce the charge. I think that's probably our best sort of direction on it. But yeah, I agree. Drones aren't dangerous. They're not. They're not causing people to die. They're not causing mid-air collisions. But what happens if it does? What happens if it does hit an airliner and take an airliner out and kill 250 people? Then we're on
the person that does that is not going to be someone
situation.
who's registered.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah,
Potentially, like it's not going to be.
Why aren't they registering bicycles? I think there were 3 pedestrians killed by bicycles in the UK last year or something. And to use a bicycle, you should have to prove you know the road rules and so forth because you're on the roads. But there's no registration for bicycles. It's a far greater problem. It's killing people. And it's so simple. Register bicycle operators and owners and cyclists so that at least you know they know the rules. But no, we don't care. We're going to chase people with toys who have never caused any injuries, and a hobby that has been one of the safest hobbies for decades. No, we're going to penalise these people. We're going to make them pay for the crimes of others. And the whole thing is that even when they do pay, the result is going to be nothing. We're not going to get anything for that money. It's not going to solve any problems. It's not going to stop people offending. It's just a giant waste of time and money.
Well, as far as sorry, Philip, I'll let you after. I'll have my rant now. But BMFA, why are they a bit miffed? Well, they could be a bit miffed. They've been around longer than the Civil Aviation Authority. They have fantastic people bemoan them and say they don't like drone operators, and they're a load of fuddy duddies like Bruce. But the bottom line is they have really good training schemes in place. They have places that you can fly. They have insurance that comes with their membership. And you know, I'm not in the UK now, but now I am a BMFA member, and I'm quite proud to be. I think they've had a bit of a kick in the nuts. Perhaps that's because the CAA can't favour one group. But you could add in Simon's FPV UK. That's another very great group that has insurance and databases and stuff like that. I'm a little bit bewildered as to why the civil aviation, because part of this remit is there's going to be training, isn't there? The CAA is going to provide training. Well, how are they going to do any better than people that have been around for 100 years? You know, it's madness. It's absolute madness.
Well, I think there's two things which I think went against the BMFA, and maybe not the BMFA, but model flyers, especially in the UK, is the incident at Heathrow, where someone was flying a remote control plane, and that caused sort of the airport to be shut down for 2 hours. I think that did go against them. Was one thing, but you've also come back to that argument we were having probably about a year ago now, Gary, which was how do you actually define the difference between a model aircraft and a drone? It actually you start getting into it, but as soon as you start asking questions and answering them, you end up asking another 5 questions and having to answer those. So it starts becoming, quite a complex definition when you're trying to define what a model aircraft is.
No, it's very easy. If you're flying a craft and you put the transmitter on the ground for 1 minute, if the craft crashes, it's a model aircraft. If it doesn't crash, it's a drone.
I don't know. I've seen some drones that can't handle that very well.
Well, let's take that thing that Heathrow chap north of Heathrow. He was nuts. He lived on the other. He was flying on the other side of one of the airport hotels, but he was north of the runway, and he wasn't crossing the flight path, and it was a foamy, and he was caught and he was dealt with. So how does the registration change? How does all this change what occurred there?
And the other thing is, it's just because you're flying near an airfield doesn't mean it's unsafe. I fly at an airfield every weekend. It doesn't mean that because you're flying within so far of an airfield, it's unsafe. We have provisions in New Zealand that let the general public fly right up to the fence of an airfield in a shielded operation, because they acknowledge that if you're not going to fly higher than the fence, there's no way you can get onto the runway. It is simple. There's not the hysteria that we've got overseas in the UK and all these other places. CAA in New Zealand has realised that it's all about risk. It's not about just a blanket ban on things. And it is safe to fly under the trees because there are no aircraft there. So it doesn't matter how close you are to an airport. If you're flying under a tree cover with a mini quad or something, you're fine. You've got shielded operation. I haven't seen any other regulator bring in this shielded operation thing, which would hugely diffuse this whole problem of people being unable to fly because they're in the controlled airspace of a certain airport, or they're within so many K of an airport. Just make shielded operations viable, and all those people with the little drones scooting around, flying through hoops and gates and things, they immediately are no longer a problem from a regulatory point of view because they're going to be operating 100% legally. Are these bureaucrats so stupid they can't see that?
And it's going to feel like James is taking the brunt of for all this. So sorry, James.
I'm definitely not being paid by the. I'm definitely not
No.
being paid by the CIA. I promise you.
I would say,
Yes.
but let's just jump straight to this last Gatwick thing, where the alleged RPAS was flying outside of this new 5 kilometer zone and may or may not have been seen. And oh yes, they did take away the very fancy counter UAS systems just last week or whatever it was. Oh dear, they couldn't see it. That just strikes me as an instant scare story after the announce. Anything that is announced on a Friday is announced on a Friday because somebody wants to bury it, and that's what the CAA thought they were going to do, was bury this story on a Friday, and it's not quite worked. I just don't trust it all. It's all a little bit fishy and a little bit political and a little bit knee jerk. And I think we've got to be very careful. Go ahead.
If CASA turned around now and said it was going to be $16.50 for a registration per aircraft, that all of a sudden, I think most Australians would be really happy with that. It's not that we agree that it's right. It's about picking the battles, like you said. At the moment, we've got a battle where it's going to be $160 an aircraft. I've got 20 aircraft that I do various testing on. That's a lot of bloody money for doing what I've already paid for a license to do. I've got my REOC. We can. Sorry, REPL. Get all the things mixed up. We're already paying all these fees to do this, that, and the other. You have to have an REOC. You have to have an REPL. You have to do this. You have to do that. We're already paying for all of that. We can already be audited by CASA at any time. Now we've got another $160 on top of that per aircraft. So let's say as a autopilot manufacturer, I decide that we're going to do a swarming drone at some stage, and we try and do a Intel light show style thing where we might use 2,000 drones. Well, 2,000 times 160, $320,000 worth of fees. Well, sorry, it's more than that. I'm getting my maths wrong. But a crap load of money for what? Registration. How does that suddenly make us safer or more dangerous? Now, per person, yeah, you can get that. Why do you need corporate registrations at all? I mean, why do companies need to register anything? If the user is already a registered drone user and they've already certified that they have done a bit of training to know that they can fly a drone, etc., or they're, Toys R Us special because they're all the same apparently. Why do we need to have companies having the registration as well then? Because everyone already knows what they're doing, so we don't need to be double registered. It's just bureaucracy for the sake of it. Yeah, we might have to compromise, and okay, that's fine. But if we agree to compromise on everything at the beginning, we're not compromising, we're bending over and taking it up the arse. Sorry, glib. It's just, yeah, it's just silly. You can't compromise at the beginning. And any of our organisations or our bodies that are supposedly supporting us as an industry who are even slightly agreeing to all of this stuff, they are the ones that are shafting us. It's actually not the CAA. It's actually not FAA or CASA. It's our organisational bodies that are actually meant to be representing our industries that are helping them shove it up our asses. Like, it's not cool. So yes, we need to pick our battles. Totally true. But it's just an unnecessary battle for CAA or FAA or CASA or any of them to be fighting.
I'm amazed.
Yeah. Anyway,
so what I would say is, what do you propose is the solution? What stance should we be taking on this?
I should say, for me,
Australia had some great rules.
Yes, best rules in the world.
Let's just leave them at that. Let's not add this new registration because it's not going to change anything. Those that are already breaking those rules are breaking the rules. At the moment, it's an online free sign up, get an ARN, you're done. You're actually registering in Australia already. It's free, and now somehow we're going to start charging for it, and that's going to improve safety. Like, I don't know. The whole thing's just stupid. it's done.
So is it the charge that you're opposed to, or is it the sign up?
I don't give a crap about signing up. I mean, you know, I'm an Australian. I'm used to everyone knowing what I'm doing. We live in a country where we've got a little Medicare card and you can look it up. I mean, New Zealand's pretty much the same. We're under pretty much the same rules. Everyone knows what we're doing. I mean, there's no real secrets. No one gives a crap. I just object to a new layer of red tape that is completely unnecessary. And that's what's being added in Britain at the moment. At a time when the comments around Gatwick of people talking about bringing dogs in to sniff out drones, and like, these people making regulations are the most incompetent fools known to man. That was just craziness.
I think
really,
I will defend the CAA a little bit. I think they're being lent on by politicians, and I should think CASA is being lent on by politicians.
Absolutely. And I support CASA where they came up with the rules they did. And what's happened is, unfortunately, some commercial UAV operators are actually the ones that caused the trouble in Australia, because they approached Senator Nick Xenophon and they talked to him about how dangerous these new regulations were going to be, because people were going to go crashing into people and killing babies and smashing into airliners and destroying holidays. And then he went and presented it to the Senate and tried to get a disallowance. That was knocked back, but it created enough of a stir that there became a political environment, that there became a Senate inquiry into the new drone rules. And CASA's tried to do the right thing. I do fully support what CASA have done. But now CASA are in a position where they have to be seen to be acting to keep these politicians happy, and now we're going to end up with a bunch of stupid extras that aren't going to change anything.
I think that's a very good point. No, I think that's a very good point, because if you read the first few paragraphs of the consultation, I think if you read between the lines, it makes it quite clear that the CAA have been asked by government to implement this. It's not the CAA who have implemented this. The CAA have been told that they have to implement. So what you need to be fighting, why should the CAA be amending their methods of maintaining aviation safety? They're meant to be a safety regulator. Their job is safety, not politics. They shouldn't be involved in politics. They should have nothing to do with politics. And they're getting involved in politics.
Bureaucrats with backbone, that's what's required.
I think if you get down to the crux of the problem, where this is really coming from is from a security angle. And what we have with drones is a situation where you could fly a drone 5 kilometers away from yourself with a bomb attached to it. And I know registration isn't necessarily going to stop that. Sorry?
20 kilometers.
20.
Blatant product placement. 20 kilometers.
Yeah, but we've had this capability for many, many years. I did my cruise missile back in 2003 and proved that you could build at that stage an autonomous craft capable of traveling long distances, carrying heavy payloads, using technology available at that time without having to be a rocket surgeon. And so terrorists have had this capability for a long, long time, but they choose instead to put suicide vests on, or drive vehicles into crowds of people, or shoot them with guns, because that's just so much more effective and convenient and practical. So, I mean, a terrorist could do all sorts of things. This terrorism angle is what governments use when they want to justify something that would otherwise be unjustifiable, because they work on we're going to protect you. Give us all we'll take away all your rights and we'll give you protection in return. And that, to me, it's like a ban. You know, when politicians and regulators run out of ideas, they just ban stuff because it's too hard. Instead of doing their job, they just, we'll ban it, the problem will go away. It never works. They had prohibition in the 20s in the USA. People still got pissed out of their trees. We've had all sorts of things that have been banned over the years. They still exist. I mean, I think firearms are, handguns are banned, but how many people get shot in the UK every year? And then you got the knife crime and stuff. We were not treating the problem, we're treating the symptom. And with drones, we don't even have a problem as such. We have a perceived problem. We have this distorted view of reality. These people need to get, whack upside the head with a glue stick so they understand what's actually happening.
Yeah, it's perceived risk versus real risk. And there is no real risk.
Wearing my RPAS hat, the way that we're kind of approaching this is to listen to our members and to basically try and relay the message that our members are putting across to us. So I would say there's probably quite an even split at the moment. Probably about 50% of our members kind of are like, okay, registration is needed. 50% of them are opposed to it. There is quite, I think this is quite, you know, that it is quite a divisive topic, quite clearly. And some, you know, we're getting hit by from all angles at the moment. We've had Gatwick, we've had Heathrow, we've had, and now the recent.
But we didn't have Gatwick.
Well, yeah, we can, but we're getting hit from all angles at the moment, the drone industry, and we're kind of saying, okay, well, let's just accept this one. Let's oppose other ones which are going to actually affect us more. But ones which are, you know, when it's £16.50 and filling out some forms, we're kind of like, okay, this isn't a big thing for us as a commercial drone operator. Now, I can completely understand from the RC modeler's perspective that it is a little, you know, it is a bit more of a problem. But for our PAS, you know, and our members, we're kind of trying to sort of essentially adhere to what our members want, and we're kind of I think in general we're trying to pick our battles. I mean, it's tricky, you know. I understand what you're saying is, you know, sometimes if you give too much room at the start, then you're kind of setting the precedent for the future. So it is a really tricky one to know how to handle this. But we did have a consultation last year, and really it's kind of become a bit too late to go and oppose this now, because the one where we should have opposed it was the previous one, where you know, they were talking about it. Now we're talking about the fee. We're not talking about whether it should exist or not. We're talking about the fee that's imposed. So, you know, it kind of feels a little bit too little too late.
But how many people in that consultation
I'm
made their
going to have to
proposal?
disappear, sorry.
Okay, mate.
I'm going to have to disappear. We're getting kicked out. But thank you very much for the chat. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Look after
See you
yourself.
He was an Aussie, eh?
Travel safely.
Cheers, Phil.
See ya. Bye.
Cheers, mate.
I wonder how many people responding to that first call for comment did so on the basis they figured that the registration would be a free thing, a sign up for nothing, or just $5 like in the USA. If they had said at the time it will cost you nearly 17 quid, would all those people have supported registration?
Yeah, that's also true. And the questions in this new thing are a little bit ambiguous. But now he's gone. I think we should get we should get our man who sat quietly for nearly 2 hours. Nicola, what's your thought? You've just sat there quietly.
Yeah. Well, you know me, don't have much to say about all of this. Well, at least up to a point.
But people will want to know. People will want to know, have you found your plane yet?
No, but snow is melting. I'm still waiting on a new camera, but a flight will happen soon enough. Just have to get some other stuff out of the way, and I'll be hitting that flying field hard.
And then are you going to use that new? Go on, Bruce.
One thing I noticed, if he'd joined up and signed up to the CAA UK's registration scheme, he could have used their proposed Find My Drone service and got his plane back.
Really? I didn't see that. What was that about? Yeah, it's a super divisive thing, and I just worry that this is the thin end of the wedge that we've got to kick up this time. I know you're bob on right, James. Everybody should have responded to that last thing with a little bit of thought.
However, if we do look at this in a positive light, if the police turn up on site and they see someone operating with a drone and they're not registered, the chances are they're doing something dodgy. And so I think it will help the police enforce the rules, because if they're not registered, then it allows them to confiscate their drone. They can look at the flight logs. They can actually properly enforce the rules. If they are registered, then at least they can sort of track that person's usage. There is a way to be able to, you know, it's the beginning of something. And, you know, we could say, well, drivers on the road don't need a driving license, but there are benefits with people having driving licenses. And I think it's very one-sided for us to say that this is going to have zero benefits for the industry whatsoever. There will be some benefits, and those who are operating legally £16.50 and filling out some forms, really, is that going to be a big deal for them? Probably not. And is it going to eliminate some of the issues? Probably some. Probably not all of them. Like, definitely not all of them. But it will eliminate some issues, and it will allow the authorities, the enforcement officers, to actually gain a little bit of ground on some of those who aren't operating properly. So from those who are following the rules, there is some benefit to be had from this. So I think it's bad for us to look at it all as negative. There will be some benefit.
Isn't the easy response to that, as I want Plod catching a burglar, not some kid flying a foamy down the park. Plod,
yeah, and I watch police interceptors. I watch police interceptors. So you're telling me that in the UK that they don't just stop people at checkpoints to see if they've been driving while intoxicated or whether their tax is up to date, because you say that only people doing things wrong will attract the attention of police with their models. Well, people innocently driving along get stopped and get breathalyzed at checkpoints. So I don't think that logic applies. I think we're going to have a situation where PC Plod, will perhaps decide, well, let's just check and see whether this registration is working. They'll descend on model flying fields and ask everyone for their registrations and things. Because if we don't get the full 170,000 people signing up, there's a huge imperative to get the money that they've run short. What better way than go and find 100 people who are flying without registration and ping them all £1,000? Woohoo, now we've covered the bills. You have much better faith in human nature, or the nature of enforcement officers, than I do. You should watch more reality TV.
I watch loads of reality TV, Bruce, but remember as well, those people who are intoxicated and go and get done while they're driving, what happens to their driving license?
Sure.
But if you watch the program the next week, they're caught again, and they also get done for driving without license and insurance. So it makes no difference. Most of those police interceptor things, virtually everyone they pull over is no license or no insurance. So it doesn't seem to be working that well for them, does it?
I think what it does do is it allows those who have committed crimes in the past, if they are caught again, even if they are operating legally now, or they've not been caught red-handed like they had been previously, at least now they can be, their drone could be confiscated and they could be fined or sent to prison or whatever it is. I think it allows enforcement officers to determine the difference between someone who's trying to abide by the law and someone who isn't, who's clearly out there just doing what they want to do without any care in the world. And as I say, I don't think it's going to solve all the problems at all, but it's going to help a little bit. It will get rid of some of the riffraff.
If there is a benefit, you say there's benefit. So why haven't they quantified that benefit, defined it and quantified it? I've seen nowhere where they've defined and quantified the benefits from registration. Surely if you're trying to pitch the sellers to people, that's the first thing you do. You say, give us your money, here's what you get, here are the benefits to you. That hasn't been done because there are no benefits to the people who are paying the money.
There's a bit of a benefit if you're a member of the BMFA, for instance, or Simon Dale's FPV UK, in that there's a magazine and you have the chance of training, and there are fields to go to, and there's insurance. There is a benefit, and there's group learning and stuff. Don't you think there's going to be Andrew Dibbins has made an interesting comment. He'd love you all to discuss what the future looks like. Imagine we're 2 or 5 years further on. Has all this nonsense gone away? Is our hobby going to disappear, or is it going to be affordable? And then I'm going to look backwards now to my parents probably would have, because I would have badgered them to let me fly my model airplanes when I was 12, 13 and 14 or whatever. But I used to build and destroy things every week. So, it's registered and whatever. Okay, it's not per aircraft in the UK, but maybe it is. Most of my stuff wouldn't have been around long enough for, as it would have been back then, for the letter to arrive in the post. I don't know. Don't you think there might be a backlash against the commercial drone, an even bigger backlash against the commercial drone industry in the UK, if it's perceived that it's the commercial drone industry in the UK that is supporting this and wants this sorted out?
Yeah, potentially. And the thing is that I think the commercial drone industry needs to align itself with aviation. I think if we want to see drones being used routinely in airspace, we need to align ourselves with aviation, because which way, when you're up against the regulators, how do you want to be perceived by the regulators? It's tricky.
My take on that. I think general aviation needs, and big airplanes need to align with the future of flight. We don't need to. Why are we having to warp to the old way of doing things when we're the new way of doing business? It's the wrong way of looking at it. They've got all right.
Gary, what is the new way of doing things? It's digitalization.
Absolutely, and pushing stuff up and out of the way, and making sure they're compliant. And certainly, if the 1650 is everywhere, and the CAA have said it's because everything has to be on parity with what manned aviation has, then I think it's time. It is time for model flyers, recreational drone flyers, to start reporting any dodgy manned flying that they're seeing, and hope for enforcement action against those pilots. If Plod's going to come and get my funny, and your cupboard was a drone, a model aircraft. Bruce mentioned a model aircraft in the cupboard. My son, who's just gone to the UK, is 18, so he's okay. He's an adult, but he's pulled two of my gliders out of a cupboard there, and he's going to be flying them. So now he's faced with all this nonsense just to go and chuck a glider off a hill in the West Country, like I did for all those years. I'm sorry, I'm not making a lot of sense here, James, but there's a lot of nonsense to this.
I get it, but we're moving to a world of digitization, and if you want to join Facebook, what's the first step of joining Facebook and joining a social network? What's the first step of
identity?
Sorry?
The first step is create a fake ID. That's what you do when you go on Facebook. You don't go on as yourself. You always give them bogus numbers. And when people want me to log in and give my date of birth, I usually put 1903 or something, And they accept it. You never give the right information. And just as if they bring registration in here in New Zealand, I'm going to register under an assumed identity and stuff them.
Right on.
Yeah, it's a thorny subject, and this may not be the way to correctly educate and bring more safety into things in this industry. I don't think it's going to help. But
we're in a world of divisiveness at the moment politically.
We are. It's true.
You only have to look at politics in the UK to realise that pretty much everything going on at the moment is divisive, and it splits everyone. So who knows what the answer is? But if it's the answer, if it's EASA, can't I just do my registration in France where it's free and can last for 5 years, and won't an EASA thing work right across wherever the EASA rules are recognised? I guess it depends on whether you're paying French tax or not.
I don't know, but it's free and lasts 5 years in France.
The only tool you have left at the end of the day in situations like this is mass civil disobedience.
But even if so let's say all 170,000 potential registrants do that isn't much of a mass protest in the big scheme of things, is it?
But it does leave CAA with a £2.8 million bill for a system that's not being used.
Well, that's the worry, isn't it? In that year 2, they've spent £2.8 million. Only, I think there was 40,000 members of the BMFA and whatever. I was registered as a Warsaw Convention allow international aircraft without yes, I don't know the Warsaw Convention. I don't know. The rant time started. Let's look. We've got to let Nicholas tell us something that's been on his bench or something like that. He's been here this whole time, and I want to hear something positive and interesting, and not even about your crash drone on the hill. Sorry, not the aircraft.
All right. Just to close off that topic, digitalization, I hope it doesn't mean we have to go to simulators soon to fly.
Okay, I'm all right. I'm okay with that.
Really? digitalizing drones as well. I'd like to see Google deliver hot coffee with a digital drone.
Absolutely. Virtual coffee. Well, it's coffee.
Yeah, that would be an achievement.
Only
That would
branded, only branded, not unbranded coffee. We can't
or
be
Amazon.
can't be having that unbranded coffee.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, back on track. Well, the plane in question has been peaking over my shoulder the whole time. It's the Talon Rebel GT, whatever. Last one, close the door. These names just keep getting longer and longer. So fully equipped autopilot and the works and 2 cameras and whatnot, an antenna tracker and, you know, everything you can think of. So should fly it within the next few days and should be interesting.
Am I seeing the wingtips tipping down at the end of that?
Yeah, I got one of those too. Actually, I'll be flying it in the next couple of days. That supposedly increases aerodynamic efficiency by reducing the size of the tip vortex and using the span-wise flow of air to be revectored in a downward position and increase lift. Hornier tips. I think they're used on 172s and things as well. Yeah.
It's also very
I think it would be easier if we digitize that.
And that all that efficiency disappears when you stick a couple of antennas out the side of the.
It shouldn't actually, and that antenna goes into a slot that is actually you get one on each wing, and it's designed when you remove these things, and that comes from the factory like that. There's a slot for you to put some gear in here. Now, I usually don't like putting video transmitters on wings because, well, can't really match it with a receiver because right here, that small thing is the receiver and that weighs nothing. And the antenna it comes with weighs nothing. So if I put a video transmitter on the other wing, it would weigh more, create more drag, then I have to add more weight on this wing and it just gets crazy. So would fly it like this, see how it works. Should be all right.
But
one thing I noticed with that model is it's got a V-tail, and traditionally V-tails are used. They're slight aerodynamic efficiency improvements, but mainly it's because it keeps the tail well clear of the ground. That's why a lot of gliders have V-tails and T-tails. They don't want the tail plane near the ground where it can get damaged.
Yeah.
Yet on that particular model, they've got dorsal fins underneath, and they can give you a spare because they're going to get broken.
Yeah.
So are those a prop guard or what are those?
No, they're just under fins or something. I don't know what they're called. It's like a mini V-tail that's passive, and it's on the underside. I'm guessing it does add a little bit to the stability of the plane, but you do get 2 of these in the box. So I think there's a good reason for that. And I think they should sell them as spare parts in like sets of 5 or 10 for $1.
Yeah, I think the mini Talon solution is better. It just has a straight vertical dorsal fin, which is far less likely to get broken than angled dorsal fins made out of foam.
Well, it depends on, well, if you're going to be landing in tall grass, probably don't mount it at all. If you've got like a nicely mowed runway or something, might survive, depending on your landing style. I saw a lot of people complaining about, I saw a lot of people complaining about the Dart XL's nose breaking off so easily, and then somebody would send me a video and landing goes like this, boom, like nose first at speed, and then I'm thinking, okay, what do you expect to happen? Yeah, the Drac or whatever is made up of some other type of foam and is probably a lot tougher, but still, most planes would break under such a landing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And actually, this one has carbon strips running through the whole fuselage on the inside on both sides. So at least I'm glad to see that Zoft are actually listening to what people are saying, because a lot of people did that on the Dart XL. They added carbon strips along the fuselage on the inside. So this one now has that out of the factory.
It looks like a little bit longer wingspan as well, just a few
Now
centimeters.
it's 1 meter.
It's 1 meter. Well, it looks a little bit better proportioned, I suppose. I don't know. Time will tell, and we'll be able to compare and contrast your two review videos and see if you get similar results. But yeah, a lot of people do seem to spear these things in, don't they? I don't know. It's the flying stuff.
I shall do a nose landing just to test it.
I think somebody should do a video on how to not land a Zoft plane.
Any plane.
Like, just fly around till the ground gets in the way.
Try not to pretend it's a carbon fiber planet glider type of thing that, you know, trying to hit that circle thingy at the race.
Yes, absolutely. Spot landing. Twang.
Yeah. Doesn't
Yeah.
work quite the same on these.
I've been sent the this is now called a D-bus, which drones by us thing to test, and it started life as a high-grade mark, and there's all sorts of controversy surrounding this, and ash from drone. This is the ash, the remains of the Lily drone saga. But all I wanted to say was that it doesn't have a GPS, and it uses vision-based sensors, and it works, or vision sensors to hold its position. It works really well. So I weirdly will also have a review video eventually, but it won't be very good, and it won't be as comprehensive as yours, and I won't say all the right things. So
Good to know.
So,
Good to know. Yeah.
no,
Why
look at
bother
it.
making it then?
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's very true. I think to go through some other parts of this story, I think, but I'm quite impressed. I don't know how much mine. Look, it folds up like they all do, and it's 238 grams.
Wow! And does it hold position at night with the lights off?
No, it doesn't.
That's a good point.
It doesn't.
That's a good point, Gary, because if you're an entrepreneur nowadays, if you can aim for the 249 gram market, you're in a good place.
You should be watching more often.
Yeah, what's going to happen when suddenly the authorities and the government and the scaremongers and the media realise that these little drones are really quite capable now. They can still spy on you by your swimming pool, and they could still carry 3 ounces of Semtec. We better bring it down to 100 grams. I can see a progressive lowering of the barrier, because it's not about safety; it's about perceived dangers, and it's about control. So
it's already 100 grams. It's already 100 grams in Australia.
No, that's for the regulation cutoff, but the registration cutoff is 250 with the new regs when they come in.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Well, the hubs on F-22 is 100 grams, so that will not be registered, and yet it has full autopilot, etc., the works, and it's quick, and you can still do some. Nah, what am I kidding? You can't hurt a fly with that thing.
And on that note, on the not hurting the flies note, with only us 3 here, but I say thanks very much, James. Sorry, a bit of a punch bag. That was terrible. I didn't mean to quite. You won't come back again, will you?
I'll always be back, Gary. I'll always be back.
Thanks.
It's good to have a devil's advocate on the panel, mate. Score's good.
It is true. It is true. Yeah, because otherwise we do rant on nonsense and not see the other way. Thank you, Nicola. I hope you find your plane in the melting snow. And Bruce, what are you bringing us soon?
I don't know. More coffee chats probably, because it seems to be quite popular. But yeah, I've got that Zod GT whatever thingy review that's due to go out as soon as the wind drops below 25 kilometers an hour. And of course, the build video for the Sub 250, which is becoming all more relevant as time goes on, and as I gradually get to the point where I'm happy with the edit. So yeah, what else? I've got some cameras from Runcam, which I'll be looking at, the little nano cameras, because again, all this really lightweight stuff is going to be the future of the hobby, if the regulators have anything to do with it. And I've got some other stuff too, which I've completely forgotten about because I'm old and I forget.
Yeah, so well, look, we've nearly been here nearly 2 hours. That's terrible. Dear viewers, thank you very much, wherever you are in the world. I see you all over the world in the comments. yeah, I think we will examine what we consider the future might be. Maybe even I'll put one of those quiz things up that people do on this sort of thing, asking people what they think the hobby might look like in 5 or 10 years, and even the commercial world in 5 or 10 years. Join us again, 2100 GMT, and next week, when hopefully we won't rant on quite so long, because hopefully there won't be this sort of nonsense. But I doubt that's going to happen. Have a lovely rest of the week. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Cheers, eh?
Yes.
Thanks.